Ernie Watts is an example of a musician that my friend Henrique and I, hey there Henrique, a little shout out to you, often talk about. The fact that, in terms of their wide array of accomplishments, session musicians don't often get the recognition that they truly deserve. It's a bit like a job, a 9-to-5 job, rather than, being a glamorous star. And to be honest with you, there are some people out there who kind of look at it in that really dour and intense way. But I think they should be celebrated in a happy way, because there's a lot of variety in it, and you really get to challenge your playing. And Ernie Watts is from Virginia, and he had worked with Charlie Hayden of Ornette Coleman fame and his quartet Qwest, and moved out to the West Coast, attended Berkeley, and when he went out there, he became part of the massive, session scene that was actually happening out there. He played for this enormous amount of people. He was on the Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention album, The Grand Wazoo. He played on a lot of the early Carole King albums. He even appeared with James Brown on his big band album, Soul on Top, and George Duke when he was first recording as a band leader on his own. He even recorded with Steely Dan on their Countdown to Ecstasy album and Pretzel Logic. That sax you hear on the song My Old School, that's Ernie Watts. And in the 1970s, right around that same time, he hooked up with Quincy Jones and was present on his album You Got It Bad Girl, which my father has. That has the theme from Sanford and Son, Chump Change from Bill Cosby's Variety Show. Quincy even sings the title cut, but that's a whole other story. And around 1981-82, Quincy Jones set up the Qwest label and started to bring a lot of the people in his inner circle into that. And most of them were vocalists, Patty Austin, James Ingram, and of course Michael Jackson. Donna Summer became part of that. And there was also some session people, and the most notable was Ernie Watts here. And this particular album you're seeing here is Quincy Jones Presents Ernie Watts, Chariots of Fire. And you see Ernie is presented up there as a champion holding his horn as an eternal flame. I just love that image. Now, this album was reissued on CD by the reissue label Wounded Bird, and I've seen it around a lot on vinyl. But my boyfriend Scott Edwards picked it up and listened to it and said, if you ever see it again, you should get it. It sounds so much like your thing. And when I first heard this album, which was released in '82, it really, really blew my mind that a Qwest-era album with that Westlake studio crew from this period had somehow slipped my mind. And I'm going to turn it over because there's a tremendous annotation that Quincy Jones wrote himself on this album. And I'm going to read it to you, but first, I don't know if you can see it. There's a picture of Mr. Watts. He played soprano, alto, and tenor sax. And here's Quincy's annotation on the back. It's my pleasure to present to you Ernie Watts, a man I have known for a long time, and whether you know it or not, so have you. Ernie's superb sax work has graced albums by artists as diverse as Barbra Streisand, The Crusaders, Christopher Cross, The Jacksons, Boz Scaggs, Ricky Lee Jones, and Earth, Wind and Fire. And he's played on a number of my recordings, including the soundtrack to Roots. A child prodigy in his native Virginia, Ernie was raised in Delaware and attended my alma mater, Berklee College of Music in Boston. Coincidentally, drummer John Robinson and bassist Neil Steubenhaus, who accompany Ernie on this album, are also Berklee grads. After 18 months with the Buddy Rich Band, Ernie moved to Los Angeles, where he had been a fixture on the television, film, and record studio scene for years. He's a prominent member of the NBC Tonight Show Orchestra and has found the time to record 4 solo albums with guitarist Lee Rettenauer and his band Friendship. Recently, I received a call from Mick Jagger. He was looking for a saxophone soloist for the '81 Rolling Stones tour. without hesitation, I told him about Ernie. And after a brief jam session with the Stones, they fell in love with Ernie's playing, and he accompanied them on what has been called the biggest rock tour ever. So kick back and relax and get up and dance to Ernie Watts. He's one of my favorites, and I hope he'll soon be one of yours. Fondly, Q. And he wasn't kidding, because this is a fantastic album. It's bookended by two versions of the title track, which I'll talk to you about, by Vangelis. The first is the theme, the dance version, and what that is the Chariots of Fire theme, which is done as a full early 80s Qwest style production. It has that sound of songs like Razzmatazz, really a lot of emphasis on the synth bass. That's a real big element of this album. So you hear him playing a very funky version of that on that particular cut. The last part is called the slow version, but it's not really a ballad or anything like, the original. What that version is, more of a somewhat slower Caribbean flavor thing, but it still has kind of a dance vibe to it. Now, if we're talking about serious Qwest-style funkiness, Hold On is the thing. It's written by James Ingram, and he sings the lead vocals on it with his brother Philip and Howard Hewitt from Shalimar. It's got Greg Phillinganes, Steve Lukather, all the people who made Thriller, one of the biggest selling albums of all time. And those people are the reason, by the way. And one of the ballads on here is a version of Lionel Richie's song Lady, which really creates a textural environment for, Ernie to solo on. And why that's important is because this song was originally recorded by Kenny Rogers. So we've only really heard a vocal interpretation of it. This gives Ernie a chance to improvise around the vocal line as a sax player, and that really does a lot for him as an artist. The last one is another spirited number with horns arranged by Jerry Hay. And that's another James Ingram vocal on the song Gigolo. That's probably my favorite cut on the album. I really, really enjoy that. The first three songs on the second side are interesting. There's this really soulful version of Valdez in the Country, a Donny Hathaway song, and this had come out a couple of years after Donny Hathaway's tragic suicide. And it really just basically modernizes his original, with that Qwest sound. I find myself wondering if Donny Hathaway had been recording at that time, if he would have sounded like that and used some of these people. It would have been fantastic to see Donny Hathaway come over to Qwest, work with Ernie Watts and Phillinganes, Jerry Hay, Steve Lukather. I would have loved to have seen Donny Hathaway up there. But, he didn't make it. So, that's a great tribute to possibly what could have been. Abraham's Theme and Five Circles are both, atmospheric Vangelis numbers. And they really, get the atmosphere of Ernie Watts playing a very cinematic sound. So you get a lot of things on this album. You get funk, you get the cinematic sound. It's Quincy. It's definitely Quincy Jones, he's got that funk, he's got that funk pop soul disco side, and he's also got that, arrangement and that ability to score. And this showcases that. And even though this guy's played with a lot of people, you can tell Ernie's having a ball. This is an album you can see he's really enjoying. So I am really glad I have this. There's another album in between these two that I haven't shown you because, to be honest with you, I don't exactly have it. And it's just called Musician. It's from 1985. Scott has it, but I don't at this time. So these are the only two Ernie Watts albums I have. This is the one that came after Musician, which isn't here, because I don't have it. It's from 1986, called Sanctuary, and it's his final Qwest album. He's recorded many others. Ernie Watts has a number of other solo albums, mostly in the instrumental jazz field, and on other labels, and that's primarily what this particular album is. This is more instrumental jazz, but what's contemporary at that time. The vibe of this album, I would say, is something closer to one of the later Weather Reports, or a more straight-up jazz fusion sound. It still has a lot of the same people, but Lee Rettenauer is back in the production, and, there's more improvising by the drummers and different people. City Speak brings in the singer Phil Perry, and that gives more of a funky flavor to it. You know, this is an album that I don't know if it has a lot of individual standouts, but it really works as an album, just listening to it and experiencing it. It's more of a jazz fusion project than it is a showcase for presenting an artist. But it presents him going back into the more instrumental jazz context rather than dealing too much with heavy arrangement, you know, and what the previous album did. And there's a few vocals here and there, but not as much emphasis on funk and not as much emphasis on arrangement, but it's another side of what Ernie Watts could do with Quincy. Quincy Jones is such an amazing musician, and every time he brings somebody into his orbit, he's an amazing arranger, too. Amazing arranger, musician, and, you know, producer, obviously. Those are his main things. And he is just fantastic with bringing out the diversity of each of the people he works with and finding the best they have in them. And he certainly found them with Ernie Watts in two different ways, especially this album. This album just blew me away. You know, if you can find it, I see it at a lot of record stores on vinyl or on CD, cassette, whatever, pick it up. It is more than worth it. If you've got The Dude, if you've got Off the Wall, if you've got the 1982 Donna Summer album, anything Quincy did at that point, this goes right with that. So this is my big 72nd birthday shout out to Ernie Watts. You know, there's been a lot of musicians who have been passing away, you know, in the jazz world over the past couple of years. There generally is. Not always huge icons. But, you know, Ernie's music is iconic to me. You know, when I heard this sound, I realized, hey, this man played on Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye. You know, his sound was just so distinctive, and it works with so many different people. And, you know, with a lot of the artists today being very singular, sometimes we forget these people who could play all kinds of music and play with such a diverse group of people, and how important it was that Quincy Jones present them that way, and he did present Ernie Watts that way. So, all that being said, happy birthday, Ernie. These are fantastic albums, and with Quincy Jones at the spearhead. And as long as Quincy and Ernie Watts and people like him are alive, we need to celebrate their music. And I think younger people out there who are getting into the music industry, who are even inclined to play instruments, need to follow these two as a model, because they were masters of what they did on both ends of the musical spectrum. So enjoy your music, and peace.